Hi, everyone. I'm your philosophy professor, Chris Davidson. You can just call me Chris. You noticed already, I hope, that in this first sort of set of videos, it's just about the basic core aspects of class. So this is a lot of what we would go over in the first day of an in-person class. But what I've done, a nice benefit of our online class is that I can break it up into different sections, and that gives you flexibility in terms of when you watch them. And if you ever say later, I have a question about what's philosophy, what's the point of it, say right before our first paper, or you have a question about assignments, you can go back and look at that video again. Okay. I've divided them up into separate parts to make it easier for you, more convenient and easier to track down. So this is Philosophy 100, Philosophy, aka Philosophy 101. I bet a lot of you are curious to know what philosophy is like, and most of you probably don't know because it's an introductory course. So, with philosophy, I find that one of the best things to do to explain what it um, is this: is you just say philosophy is deep thoughts, right? Philosophy asks those deep, big questions. What's the meaning of life? What happens to us after we die? How do I know what's right and wrong? And how do I live in a world where not everyone else agrees with me about that? Okay. So, philosophy asks the hard questions for which there are no easy answers. But part of what I'll show you today is that there are, in fact, answers, or at least there's a method by which we can reach answers, and that is philosophy. So, again, philosophy asks the hard questions, but it doesn't just ask questions, it supplies some answers to those tough questions. And they're answers you're not really going to get anywhere else. Okay. So here's something sort of boring but very important about philosophy. Another good way to talk about what philosophy is to clear up some misconceptions about what it is. So a lot of people think, for instance, that philosophy is useless, that it's not worth your time to take philosophy classes. But just as one small little bit of proof of why philosophy might be worth your time is that even for something like jobs and getting paid well, philosophy can help. So small little bit of proof. You can ask me more about this if you want. But um, people who major in things like philosophy don't get paid a ton when they first graduate from college. But within 10 years, they're making more than almost anyone except for doctors, lawyers, uh, engineers, etc. Now, why is that? It's because there's something very useful about studying philosophy that pays off, and not just in one day, but across your whole life. So you can think about why that might be this way. A lot of majors or classes will teach you a skill, a set skill that you can use. Great. But what philosophy does is it's like the tool that teaches you how to use every other tool. It's the skill that helps you figure out how to become skillful at everything else. So what happens is 10 years out, people who study philosophy are getting promoted more often and further than other people. Why? Because their skills don't get obsolete. Philosophy skills don't get obsolete. They teach you to keep teaching yourself for the rest of your life. Whereas what you learn in, say, your computer science class probably isn't going to be that relevant in 10 years, is it? But philosophy is timeless that way. That is, its relevance remains important across time. And that's probably why every culture has some kind of philosophy. Ancient China had philosophy, contemporary Europe has philosophy, Africa has its own style of doing philosophy. And every culture recognizes the value of philosophy. Okay. So don't think of philosophy as being old and therefore outdated. Think of it more as that even the old stuff has been updated, not outdated, but updated, more like a remix for our contemporary times instead of something that we've just moved beyond and don't need anymore. Okay, so a big part of philosophy is what we in philosophy call arguments. And we don't mean arguments like when you fight with someone, but arguments in the sense of what a lawyer crafts, right, for their case, how they put proof for and evidence together. So part of what I mean when I say logic, we'll get into this in later classes, is that sometimes when you prove one idea is true, you can then use that first idea to prove a second idea. Okay? So, for instance, if you can prove to me that the meaning of human life um, is to maximize happiness, and that's true for all human beings, then you can move to this second idea that, oh, therefore it must also be true, second idea, that you should maximize your happiness in your life. So do you see how if you prove one idea logically, sometimes you can move to a second idea and prove that as well? The art of doing that is what we call making arguments. Okay? So the trick, though, is that this is a little bit harder than it seems at first, because um, you can move from some ideas logically to other ideas, but sometimes you can't, basically. So let me put it this way. Okay, you've got two ideas. First one, it rained. That's your first idea, and you proved that it rained. The second idea, which you can move logically to, is therefore the ground must be wet. Idea two. One, I proved to you that it rained. Two, you know that if it rained, idea one, idea two must be true. The ground's going to be wet. And you get that, right? That anytime someone says it's rained, you can say, then the ground will be wet if it just rained. Every time. Those ideas are logically connected. But ideas that aren't logically connected, and this is where it gets tricky, is that this doesn't mean that if you look at the ground and it's wet, it does not mean that you can logically say it must have rained, right? Someone could have left their hose on, their sprinkler. My old car might be leaking fluids on the ground, no rain. So this is what I mean when I say logic, and philosophy will help you refine your logical thinking, is that you can logically say every time it rains, the ground gets wet. You can't logically say that just because the ground is wet, every time it must have rained. You see how in this case, the logical connection is sort of a one-way street? Okay. Now, there's two things I'd like to say here. The first one is this. Hopefully you can see from what I've said about rain and wetness that we all agree on both of those. Okay, we all agree on both of those. But again, a misconception about philosophy is that philosophy is just opinions. It's just what somebody thinks. But in fact, since philosophy uses logic to craft arguments, it's not about opinions. Just to be super clear about this, if we define or clarify what opinion means, people usually mean by opinion something that's not agreed upon by all people. Your opinion is that the Buffalo Bills are the worst football team of all time. Someone else's opinion is that it's, I don't know, the Seattle Seahawks. It's an opinion. We can't agree on it. Okay? But logic is the opposite of opinions. Logic is things like, if it rains, then the ground gets wet. Things we all agree upon. So whenever philosophy uses logic, that is, things defined as all agreed upon, then it's not opinion, things that we don't all agree upon. Okay? So that's one point I'd like to make. And also, do you see what I did? Haha, I used logic to talk to you about the logical foundations of philosophy. I said, since this thing, if philosophy uses logic, and logic is the opposite of opinions, then philosophy is not just opinions, because it's often the opposite of opinions. That's logic. Okay, my second point is this, is that I'm sure what I said about rain and wetness is not a shock to you. You know that already. You don't need me or this class to know that. So you think, well, why do I need this class? It's because we can all get better at using logic. Think about it this way. It's a metaphor I'm going to give you. Basically, everyone knows how to walk, right? Everyone knows how to walk. And yet people make mistakes when walking pretty regularly. I literally today, when I was out taking a walk, I did that thing where you stub your toe and then you sort of, you pretend to start jogging, right? So I know how to walk. You know how to walk. I made a mistake or could have been better at walking earlier today. It literally happened. Logic is the same way. You already know how to do the rain wetness thing, okay? But I'm going to teach you how to do more complicated things um, about the tough questions, the hard to answer questions um, that take a little more skill and practice, okay? So think about it this way. Again, the analogy or metaphor. Basically everyone knows how to walk. But some people, like Simone Biles, the gymnast, she's really good at walking, right? She's really good at walking, okay? So do you want to be an average walker? Or do you want to be able to walk like Simone Biles does? Now, when she walks, right, she walks beautifully, confidently, straight line, right? Because she's practiced. That's what our class is going to be, is practicing logic so that we can answer the big questions, so that we can think and live beautifully and impressively like Simone Biles, an Olympic gymnast, instead of like someone who sort of stumbles literally and metaphorically through life. Okay? Okay. One final point, we're keeping these ones nice and short. Okay. You might say, okay, the cool metaphor, bro, but I don't see how it would actually show up in real life. It's not literally gymnastics. Here's how I'll show you, and I'll keep this very brief. Um, Socrates, a philosopher, he wanted to ask this tough question. Should death be feared? Is death scary or not? Okay. That's a tough question. You need philosophy really to answer it. Now, he figured out logically that he says death is not to be feared. And the reason why is this. Think about it this way, is you should only fear things which have something truly bad about them, right? So AIDS is truly bad because it will kill you or weaken your immune system greatly at the minimum. And so it is something which should be feared. It's truly fearful, so you should fear it. But what about sitting in your favorite easy chair? Doesn't seem to be anything truly bad or truly fearful about sitting in your easy chair. So you should fear AIDS because it's truly bad, but you shouldn't fear sitting in your favorite easy chair because it's not truly bad, right? Okay. Well, what happened, this is true fact, in Socrates' life, there were basically corrupt politicians um, who tried to blackmail him basically and force him to do something wrong and immoral. They said, we'll kill you if you don't do it. But see, he didn't fear death because he said, I don't know enough about death. I don't know if it's like the easy chair or more like AIDS. I don't know if it's truly bad. So I don't know if I should truly fear it or not. So he just was neutral on death. So when they tried to blackmail him and said, we'll kill you if you don't do this bad thing, he said, I'm not scared of death. So he didn't do the immoral thing. Now, the other flip side of this true story is this, is that other people who weren't philosophers, who didn't use logic to answer these tough questions about life and death, they still feared death. So when they were blackmailed by the bad politicians, they in fact did do the bad thing. They only did the bad thing because they feared death. They were threatened with death and they were scared, so they did the bad thing. They only feared death, though, because they hadn't done philosophy. It's really this simple, is that Socrates used logic and applied it to difficult questions. That made him a better person, a stronger person like Simone Biles. And when a tough time came in his life, he did the thing he really wanted to do, the moral right thing. And those who weren't prepared with philosophy first did something they thought was bad because they were scared. So that's just one random example. The class will hopefully be full of them for you, but of how using logic and philosophy, applying it to tough questions, can actually improve your own life. Okay? It can actually help you do the things you want to do better and better, stronger. You already know how to walk, but you could walk even prouder, even stronger, like Socrates or an Olympic gymnast. And philosophy can help you do that. Okay? So that's in a nutshell what philosophy is. I'm sure you have questions. If you do, just email me and you and I can talk about it in more detail together. Okay, thank you, everyone.